I never imagined I would find myself standing in the middle of my own living room, trembling, a stack of compromising photos clutched in my clammy hands. In a single night, my entire life had collapsed. Just hours before, I'd been gnawed by a vague sense of unease, but nothing could compare to the fury and disgust that now boiled inside me as I realized the implications of what I held. I was supposed to be a loving husband. I'd known Jennifer since we were wide-eyed teenagers in high school. We had been married for 9 years. We'd been through the usual ups and downs, major moves, student debt, career missteps, arguments over whose turn it was to fold the laundry, all of it. We had matured together, always side by side, facing challenges as a united front. Of course, I wasn't perfect, but I sincerely saw myself as a good man. Stable, dependable, always there for her. Even when the years passed and our home was on the brink of foreclosure, I tried to be her rock. I was the pillar that refused to let everything crumble. But the moment I flipped through those photos, every reassuring idea I had about my wife, my marriage, my very existence, shattered with a deafening crash inside my head. The man I was becoming, ruthless, furious, vengeful, terrified me. Yet, the feeling of betrayal in my chest was far stronger than any guilt I felt for the horror I was about to unleash. I had just left the small law firm where I worked, my head pounding after a day of reading contracts for a local nonprofit. My job wasn't glamorous. I specialized in small claims, contract law, that sort of thing. But I was proud of it. I helped real people, not faceless corporations. I tried to keep my moral compass intact. It was on that day that I found a plain, unmarked envelope waiting for me in the top drawer of my desk. It was the strangest thing. There was no name on the outside, just my initial, scribbled in pen, as if someone had either broken in or gotten special permission from the office staff to leave it there. I opened it, my insides twisted with confusion and repulsion. There were nearly a dozen photos, each one a little blurrier than the last, but they still showed perfectly recognizable images of Jennifer wearing what looked like latex or leather, kneeling on a small stage in front of numerous clients in a dimly lit, high-end establishment that looked more like an upscale fetish lounge than a common strip club. In some photos, she was with older couples, or two couples, maybe more. Another showed her with her arms behind her back, in an apparent display of submission, flashing neon lights glowing around them. The photos grew stranger, her face contorting into an almost manic grin, a kind of grotesque glee reflected in her eyes. This wasn't just dancing or classic stripping. This was the realm of a swingers club, filled with bizarre performances for private guests. Even as my brain screamed that it could be a trap or a setup, I recognized her. The posture, the tilt of her head, the shape of her body, the line of her jaw. My wife. The date stamps printed on the edge showed the images were very recent. 2 weeks ago, 5 days ago, even from the same week. So many emotions hit me at once. Confusion, betrayal, a twisted sense of admiration that she could hide something of this magnitude, and a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. There was no clean, orderly way to process any of it, and for a moment, I just stood at my desk, cycling through the photos again and again, as if hoping they would transform into something else. My vision literally darkened at the edges from the anger rising within me. I put the photos back in the envelope, locked it in my desk, and tried to steady my breathing. I had to confirm if this was real, and a part of me wanted to gather every piece of evidence in the world so she would have no chance to talk her way out of it. Within the hour, I called a private investigator I had used on a pro bono case. It was expensive, yes, but I had to know the truth. A simple set of photos could be faked, or so I told myself, in the futile hope that I was still just being naive. But my gut told me otherwise. If these photos were real, Jennifer was leading a life I had never suspected in my worst nightmares. That night, I went home, my mind still on fire. Jennifer wasn't there. A note in the kitchen said she'd gone out for groceries and would be back late. No details, no explanation. Typical for the last few months. She had become increasingly vague about her whereabouts and had started wearing bras and underwear that cost more than our monthly grocery bill. I would ask questions, but she'd deflect them with charming smiles or quick pirouettes. Now, I wondered if every piece of lingerie was for those strangers at that club. Who knew how many of them had touched what she was wearing? The thought made my skin crawl with revulsion. I spent a night of torture, oscillating between sleeplessness and delirium. When my phone finally rang the next morning, it was the PI. He asked me to meet him in a parking lot near an old diner on the edge of town. That's where I would get the definitive proof, he said. I drove with both hands gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. At the diner, I found him sitting in a booth, a small folder in front of him. I dropped unceremoniously onto the bench across from him. He slid the folder toward me and said, "I'm sorry." Inside were more photographs, some in high-resolution color, of Jennifer parading around a large, lavish room dominated by strobe lights and a central stage. The sign outside read, "Members Only Weekend Surprise Night." More photos. Jennifer leaving with wads of cash stuffed into a small clutch. Jennifer kissing older clients. Jennifer in a full-body latex catsuit that left only her eyes and mouth exposed. And, worst of all, her standing in the middle of the stage, her wrists in chains, performing an elaborate, humiliating routine as onlookers cheered. The images were explicit enough that I had to force my eyes to keep looking. Where? Where is this? I whispered, my voice hoarse. An exclusive swingers club, the PI answered in a low voice. They host private parties for wealthy members. Apparently, she's been going 2 nights a week for months. My stomach nodded. She'd been telling me she had extra roles or small acting jobs. All this time, she was doing this for money, or maybe even for pleasure. I stared into the swirl of cheap coffee in front of me, fighting the urge to flip the table in a fit of rage. "Send me everything you have," I said, "every photo, every timestamp. I need it all." He nodded grimly. "I'm sorry it ended up this way." It wasn't enough for me to have the photos. A part of me, a wild primal urge, wanted to confront her in the moment, to see with my own eyes what she was doing, and yes, maybe to punish her in some way for making a fool of me. I was seething, but I couldn't alert her, so I told her I had an overnight assignment and wouldn't be home. In reality, I arranged to get into that secret club as a paying customer. The entry fee was outrageously high, but I had enough in my account, and I didn't care if I had to spend every last cent just to set foot in that vile place. On the agreed upon night, a Friday, I showed up at an anonymous building in a remote area behind a row of abandoned warehouses. My heart was pounding. A line of masked individuals stood by a large, muscular bouncer who was checking membership cards. The PI had provided me with a way to bribe my way in. Sure enough, after discreetly slipping the bouncer some cash, he let me pass. I stepped into a lavish, dimly lit lounge with plush armchairs arranged around small tables. In the center was a stage encircled by a walkway. The entire place reeked of expensive perfume, leather, and a faint tang of sweat. My senses were in overload. Laughter, moans, and the clinking of champagne glasses echoed off the walls. I was handed a black and silver mask at the entrance. I had already put on a dark suit to blend in with the upscale clientele that apparently frequented this place. Trying to remain calm, I moved through the crowd and slipped into a seat near the stage, every nerve in my body on fire. Couples of various ages were scattered about. Some were in their 50s or 60s, dressed in extravagant evening wear, watching the stage with greedy eyes. A hush fell over the audience as the lights shifted to a harsh purple, highlighting the walkway. That's when my wife appeared, dressed in an impossibly tight latex catsuit that shimmered under the spotlights. Her face was partly concealed by a black half mask, but her eyes were visible, and I recognized them with painful clarity. My heart was beating so violently I was sure the whole table must be shaking. She was accompanied by two men in theatrical hoods, holding her on a leash. The onlookers around me whispered with excitement. Some applauded, others just stared, their lips parted. Jennifer, or whatever stage name she used, paraded down the walkway in her latex outfit, carrying herself with a brazen confidence. She reached the stage in the center. There, she knelt gracefully, as if she had done this routine hundreds of times. An older couple, probably in their 60s, beckoned her over. She crawled on her hands and knees. My entire body was tense, my fists clenched so tight they ached. The show was grotesque. She was actually performing acts of submission for them, arching her back, pressing her gloved hands to the floor as if in supplication. The older woman in the couple handed her some kind of prop, a phallic-looking toy, it seemed. As the older man laughed, the crowd's murmurs grew more frantic. Jennifer placed the toy between her teeth, arching her back in an overtly provocative way. The scene was so twisted and embarrassing, my mind struggled to keep up. Suddenly, hooded men surrounded her, providing an even more humiliating spectacle for the observers. Every so often, she would turn her face to them, performing what was clearly a choreographed performance that flirted with the boundaries of decency, and then crossed them by a mile. I felt sick, my stomach churning. Yet, I was unable to move. I was nailed to that seat, the mask pressing hotly against my face, the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. The minutes stretched on, each one more agonizing than the last. She moved on to a new routine, kneeling and performing bizarre pantomimes that involved letting an older couple slip money into small pockets or the cleavage of her latex suit. She laughed as if it were the most exhilarating moment of her life, and the crowd cheered. I couldn't take it anymore. Something inside me snapped so abruptly, I almost blacked out from fury. I rose from my seat, pushing my way through the crowd of onlookers. My vision was tinged with red from a hatred and grief so intense it felt like I was floating. Reaching the edge of the stage, I tore off my mask, throwing it aside in a theatrical gesture that immediately drew attention. My voice boomed, "Jennifer!" She stopped her act mid-motion and whipped around. The entire crowd seemed to hold its breath in unison. Her eyes widened in shock, the half mask failing to conceal her recognition. She scrambled to her feet, confusion mixing with absolute horror. "What what are you doing here?" she stammered, raising a latex-gloved arm as if to shield herself. The bright spotlights illuminated the trembling around her lips. It was too late. My vision narrowed. I screamed, my voice echoing in the sudden silence of the crowd. "What do you think I'm doing here? I have your pictures. I have the videos." Too. What the hell is this, huh? Is this how you thank me for everything we built together? She tried to regain her composure, lifting her chin in a defiant posture. "You have no right to be here," she shot back, her words cracking under the strain of rising panic. Yet, there was an underlying arrogance, too, as if I were the one trespassing on her territory. "You're violating my privacy. It's my job. I don't need your permission." Rage threatened to steal my voice. "You disgust me." "I gave you everything," she spat back. "Love, a home, loyalty. And you thank me by crawling around for these decrepit old men? Shut up." She shrieked, taking a step forward, a trembling, latex-gloved finger jabbing toward my face. "Don't you dare come in here and embarrass me like this. How could you do this? Spy on me? Just show up unannounced?" She let out a hollow, joyless laugh. "You're stalking your own wife." "My wife?" I echoed. "The same wife who's rolling around on the floor for strangers in a swingers club. That's a fine line you've drawn." She glanced around, realizing the entire club was now watching her. The bravado crumbled, replaced by fury and humiliation. She stomped her foot on the stage, acting as if she held the moral high ground. "This is my life. You don't get a say in what I do. I told you I needed space. If you try to drag me out of here, I'll call the police." My own rage intensified. I vaulted onto the low stage, ignoring the gasps and the hooded men who started to close in. "You're coming home. Now." I grabbed her by the wrist. She wrenched her arm away violently. "Get your hands off me!" she screamed, her voice echoing in the sudden silence. "If you touch me again, I will scream so loud the cops will arrest you for assault. This is private property. You have no right to be here." The crowd parted in seconds. A pair of massive bouncers, more like bodyguards, descended on me, tackling me from behind. My face hit the stage floor with a brutal shock, the metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. I struggled and spat, but they twisted my arms behind my back, securing them with plastic zip ties. The crowd drew back, some onlookers snickering condescendingly, others whispering in shock. Jennifer stood over me, panting with adrenaline, her face a twisted mask of hysteria and triumph. "I warned you," she hissed. "You can't just barge in and ruin my show." "You're insane," I choked out, my lips burning from the impact. "Just wait until I—" She cut me off by turning her back, signaling for the bouncers to take me away. They hauled me toward the exit, half dragging me as I struggled. I could hear the jeers of some of the well-heeled clients, as if I were a piece of trash they were glad to see thrown out. The next moment, I was shoved through the doors, landing hard on the pavement outside. A few seconds later, One of the bouncers cut the plastic ties and delivered a well-aimed kick to my ribs for good measure. They left me there, coughing, my face burning with humiliation and rage. I lay there for what felt like an eternity before staggering to my feet. My mind was a storm. She had threatened me, humiliated me, and treated me like an intruder. This was the woman who had once told me I was her soulmate, who talked about setting up a family trust, traveling through Europe again, and living happily ever after. In hindsight, the rage that coiled around my heart that night never truly faded. It only hardened, solidifying into something dark and unforgiving. I drove home, blood still trickling from my split lip, the humiliating scene replaying endlessly in my mind. Around 2 in the morning, I collapsed on the living room couch. I didn't sleep. I just watched the hours tick by on the digital clock. Jennifer didn't come home that night, or the next day, or the day after that. On the fourth day, I took a half day off work and called a locksmith. I had every lock on every door replaced. If she planned on crawling back, it wouldn't be on her terms. As expected, early that evening, I heard the jingle of keys at the front door, followed by frustrated rattling and finally her voice. "Open up! I know you're in there." I took my time getting to the door. I opened it just wide enough to glare at her. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, her hair a mess. A spark of fury lit her features the moment she realized she wasn't getting in. "You changed the locks?" she demanded, looking outraged as if I were the one out of line. "I did," I said coldly. "I don't want you here." She tried to push past me, but I braced a hand on the doorframe. "You can't do this," she seethed. "This is my house, too." "Not for long," I retorted. "You gave up your say when you had me assaulted in that filthy club. You made your choice." She stared at me, her fists clenched at her sides. Then her expression shifted into something more cunning. "Fine. You won't let me in? We'll see what the police have to say about that. I'll have you arrested for domestic abuse." I leaned forward with a sneer, letting none of my own dark rage show. "Try it. The bodyguards already did a number on me. On your orders. I have pictures of my injuries, doctor's notes, everything. So go ahead. You'll be the one behind bars for assault, along with your little club buddies." "You," she spat, her eyes bulging with hatred. "You think I can't defend myself legally? We'll see about that." I slammed the door in her face. She pounded on it for another few minutes, screaming obscenities, then stormed off to her car. I watched from the living room window until her taillights disappeared down the street. My breath was shaky. A part of me felt sick. I'd never imagined barring my own wife from our home. There was no going back now. She had made that perfectly clear. The next day, I learned she was staying with her mother. A passing neighbor confirmed it, having seen her throwing suitcases into her trunk and speeding away. Good riddance, I told myself, though a dull ache lingered in my chest. The house felt eerily quiet. After 9 years, her presence, for better or worse, had been woven into the fabric of my days. Now, I paced through empty rooms, half expecting her to appear with a mocking smile or a haughty remark. But there was no time for sentimentality. I had to move fast. She had threatened legal action, and she was cunning enough to follow through. I needed a lawyer, and not just myself. I specialized in contracts, not messy divorces. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney a colleague recommended. Before I left, I gathered all the evidence: the photos, the private investigator's file, the arrogant text messages from her, threatening me with dire consequences if I ruined her career. As I was locking up the house, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A woman's voice came through. "Hello? Is this Jennifer's husband?" My pulse quickened. "Who is this?" "My name is Nancy," the woman said. We we worked together at the club. She showed me pictures of you once. I recognized your face when you came in. I need to see you." I paused, my fingers tightening around the phone. "I'm not sure what you want." "I have information," Nancy continued, her voice lowering. "About Jennifer, about her whole operation." "What do you mean, operation?" "She was recruiting other women," she said. "Wives, girlfriends. She'd bring them in for auditions, have them sign membership contracts. She was taking a cut of their earnings. She she bragged about it. I left the club recently, but I feel horrible about some of the things I knew and kept quiet. I'm willing to share what I know if you need it." My heart was hammering against my ribs. "We can meet. Name the place." We settled on a small coffee shop downtown, a public place where neither of us would feel watched. When I arrived, Nancy was already there, sitting at a table in the back. She was dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her posture tense. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, motioning for me to sit. I watched her warily as I took the opposite chair. "Why are you doing this?" Nancy sighed. "Guilt, mostly. Jennifer pulled me into some things. I'm not proud of it, but I needed the money." At first, she was friendly, but over time, I realized she enjoyed it for more than just the cash. She told me she got off on the power. She loved luring naive wives into her circle, pushing them into new territory and pocketing a percentage of their earnings. And you know what else? She thought it was hilarious how clueless her loving husband was. My jaw tightened. She was bragging about me. "Bragging isn't the right word," Nancy said, looking apologetic. "It was more like she was mocking you. She said you'd never find out because you were too busy playing lawyer, working late, too naive to ever suspect your precious wife. And if you ever did find out, she was sure you'd panic and come crawling back to her. She said you were easy to manipulate. I'm sorry." My blood was boiling, but I kept my voice even. "I want every piece of evidence you can give me." Nancy nodded. "I have messages between us, screenshots of texts where she talks about how she recruits the women. And I can testify that she was never forced into anything. She was the ringleader. Plus, she was pocketing huge amounts of cash, way more than a simple performer's salary. She was brokering deals. She even bragged about using the money to buy new furniture for the house." I exhaled, my heart pounding. She had told me it was a secret side job in television. Nancy gave a bitter smile. She told a lot of people that, but it wasn't just about the money for her. She loved those nights. She loved being the star. There was no hidden shame or reluctant sacrifice. She was proud. As Nancy scrolled through her phone, showing me entire conversation threads, pictures, and even short video clips, my stomach twisted into a knot. One video showed a clearly intoxicated Jennifer bragging, "He told me he'd had enough. But who am I kidding? I can never get enough of these nights. I closed my eyes. The last spark of hope that Jennifer had only done this out of desperation, the last shred of sympathy, evaporated. Why risk telling me all this? I asked, after a long silence. She bit her lip. Because I want out, and I don't want to live with her secrets anymore. I'm trying to do the right thing. I also suspect she'll drag my name through the mud if this goes to court. Let me help you. I'm willing to give a formal statement. I can't stay quiet any longer. I left that coffee shop with a burning sense of purpose. Jennifer had done more than cheat. She had humiliated me, used me, and laughed at my ignorance. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about vengeance. I was going to bury her under legal ramifications, so severe she would regret the day she ever crossed me. I hired the divorce lawyer, a steel-eyed woman named Barbara, who specialized in high-conflict cases. She was older, sharp, with a no-nonsense attitude. When I laid out the mountain of evidence, photos, texts, videos, plus Nancy's willingness to testify, Barbara's eyebrows simply rose a fraction. She might try to file first, she warned, especially if she's as vindictive as you say. We'll be ready. Sure enough, not even a week had passed before I was served with official separation papers and a civil complaint accusing me of domestic abuse, intimidation, and child neglect. A child. My head nearly exploded when I read Jennifer's claim that I had refused to support an 11-year-old daughter. A daughter she alleged was biologically mine, and that I was a deadbeat dad. In 9 years of marriage, I had never heard a single word about this child. True, Jennifer had been 2 years ahead of me in high school, and there'd always been some confusion about her grade level, but I had chalked it up to some personal or family reason. Now, it all clicked into play. She must have dropped out because of a pregnancy and returned later, never telling me a thing. She was trying to paint me not just as an abuser, but as a father who refused to acknowledge his secret daughter. The entire situation was grotesque and insane. But if I had learned anything, it was that Jennifer loved insane plans. I stormed into Barbara's office, slamming the complaint down on her desk. She's completely lost her mind. She's claiming I abused her and cheated on her with that friend from the club, Nancy, when I only met Nancy after the fact. Barbara didn't seem particularly shocked. Classic tactic, she murmured. People like your wife often try to pile on as many accusations as possible. They hope something will stick, or that it will force the other party into a settlement. Well, she picked the wrong target. We're not settling for anything. I want to demolish her in court. Barbara nodded. We'll request an urgent hearing. Let's put an end to this. The day of the hearing arrived. The tension was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. The old courthouse stood imposing with its columns and arches, the state flag fluttering near the entrance. My stomach was a knot of adrenaline and lingering fury. Inside, we took our places. Jennifer walked in, flanked by her mother, a few other family members I recognized from the wedding, and a sleek, slender lawyer. She shot me a dark look that held no shame, only defiance. At her side stood a young girl, maybe 12 years old, with eyes that did, in fact, resemble Jennifer's. It took an effort not to stare, not to feel that jolt of shock at the idea that Jennifer might have had this child all along, never telling me, never sharing this enormous secret. Once everyone was seated, the judge, a stern woman with short gray hair, entered. We all rose, then sat. Jennifer's lawyer began with a tangled web of accusations. My client has been subjected to repeated domestic abuse, controlling behavior, and, in a most shocking turn, her husband's absolute refusal to support his own child. We have photographic evidence that this man frequented a known associate from an adult club and was seen in a violent altercation at the very establishment where my client worked to contribute to their mortgage. He forcibly removed her, causing her distress and physical injury. This same man, her husband, changed the locks, leaving her homeless and destitute. We are seeking alimony, child support, and compensation for emotional damages. I sat there, my fists clenched. The audacity, the shameless rewriting of events. She was painting me as a monster. Then came my turn. Barbara rose, her voice calm but firm. Your Honor, these allegations are baseless. We have considerable evidence to prove it. First, my client had absolutely no knowledge of any child's existence. There was no communication, no proof that this child was ever acknowledged as his. In fact, the mother never informed him during nearly a decade of marriage. We also have documented proof of who actually inflicted violence. Verbal threats made against my client, culminating in physical violence, inflicted by employees of the establishment where the defendant works. The defendant has social media posts about her successful nights out, never once indicating fear or intimidation. We asked the court to review our exhibits, which demonstrate that Ms. Jennifer, in fact, continued her employment contrary to previous claims of being driven out or left financially destitute. That was the cue for Barbara to submit the private investigator's photos, text records from Nancy, as well as images of me after I had been assaulted by the club's bouncers. For the final touch, Barbara gestured to the back of the courtroom, where Nancy stood up. A hush fell over the room as Nancy approached the witness stand. The color drained from Jennifer's face. She clearly had not anticipated Nancy testifying against her. Jennifer's mother looked confused and angry. The lawyer shuffled through his notes as the judge motioned for Nancy to speak. In a composed voice, Nancy recounted how Jennifer actively recruited other married women into the club for a percentage of their earnings. How Jennifer said she had absolutely no intention of quitting because she loved the thrill and the extra money. How Jennifer only started leveling accusations of abuse once her husband discovered the truth. How Jennifer would brag about her husband's ignorance and his supposedly easy to manipulate nature. Nancy also confirmed that I, the husband, had only met her after the photos were leaked. The picture of me and Nancy in a coffee shop was solely for me to gather details. No affair, no romantic involvement. When Barbara played a short audio clip Nancy had recorded of Jennifer boasting about making good money off of naive housewives, the entire courtroom tensed. Some of Jennifer's family members gasped, while her lawyer shot daggers with his eyes. Finally, Barbara drew the court's attention to the bank records obtained through discovery, which showed Jennifer's substantial deposits from the club, clearly indicating she had not been left destitute. She had squirreled away thousands of dollars. Throughout all of this, Jennifer seemed to shrink further into her seat, her bravado crumbling. Her lawyer stammered a few objections, but the evidence was too solid. The judge demanded an explanation about the secret child. Why was there no paternity test, no official mention of this child for years? Jennifer answered only with silence. Her mother tried to say something, but the judge quickly silenced her. When the judge finally spoke, the room felt electric, like a live wire. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the testimony, this court finds the allegations of domestic abuse to be unsubstantiated. Furthermore, there is overwhelming documentation of the defendant's substantial, undeclared income. Her request for alimony is denied. Regarding the child in question, no proof has been provided that the plaintiff is the legal or biological father. If the defendant wishes to pursue this claim, a separate petition and a paternity test will be required. As it stands, the request for child support here is entirely unfounded. This court hereby grants the divorce. Both parties are now legally separated. I stood there, heart pounding, my entire body rigid with a surge of emotion. The final moments stretched on, Jennifer refusing to meet my gaze, her face a silent mask. The heavy silence in the courtroom felt charged, as if something might still explode. I caught her mother's expression: indignation, disappointment, a whirlwind of confusion. The young girl beside her stared at the floor, her cheeks flushed. Jennifer's lawyer closed his briefcase with a resigned sigh. The judge struck the gavel. Court is adjourned. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for days, weeks, maybe years. My mind buzzed with 1,000 thoughts, from elation to fury to a strange sense of hollow victory. In the periphery of my vision, Jennifer shot me one last look, a strange mixture of contempt, betrayal, and a flicker of fear. For the first time, I felt she knew she had lost, that her illusions had shattered, that all her threats, manipulations, and her secret double life had finally caught up with her. I didn't say a word. I just let the moment hang there, heavy and suffocating, refusing to break her gaze until she turned abruptly and walked away with her family in tow. My heart beat like a war drum, each thud echoing the vow I had made to myself. I would never again let her or anyone turn my life into a nightmare. There was no neat epilogue, no sweet sense of closure. The tension spilled into the air, heavy and bitter, as we all filed out of that battle-scarred courtroom, carrying secrets and resentments that might never be truly resolved. Yet for me, it ended right there, in that moment, on that razor's edge, between fury and a dark satisfaction. The marriage was finished, shredded by her lies and sealed by the judge's decree. And so, it concluded in a suffocating silence, with no illusions left to shield us from the bitter truth.